Which member of the 2025 Seattle Seahawks has the best chance to surprise us? All right, everybody. Good morning. Happy Friday. Happy 4th of July. Hope things are going well. And we're going to take a little bit of a detour today with this video because ESPN put together a pretty interesting article that has some interesting Seahawks discussion in it that I think is worth going over, because this is something that I've talked about a little bit during this offseason, and I kind of like the fact that we're getting some early indications that things might be going this way. So I'm going to talk about this article from ESPN. It was posted a few days ago. I didn't notice it when it was posted, but it's not like the information in it has expired or anything. So let's go ahead and dive into it now. Basically, this article is listing out the biggest surprise player for each team, which is basically what's a player that a lot of people, maybe even fans of that team, are not thinking about that much right now, that could end up having a non-trivial, significant, or even really big impact on the 2025 season. And this is meant to be a positive article. Obviously, you can have bad surprises. Like, what would be a bad surprise for the Seahawks? It would be Leonard Williams going off a cliff and becoming a league average defensive lineman. It could be JSN going back to earth and producing like he did as a rookie, right? Those would be the negative surprises. This article is more about the positive surprises. So I gotta say, I like what they're talking about in this article, and I think this is interesting, and I think this merits some discussion. And the paragraphs they had on the Seahawks portion of this article, I think, are a good read. So before we get into this, please click the thumbs up button on this video if you haven't already. Subscribe if you're new. Click the bell for notifications. Become a channel member for $2 a month. Those are the best ways to support the channel. So it's a fun article. They obviously have an entry for all 32 teams, but jumping down to the Seahawks list, it is very much a surprise. This is actually a good surprise, right? Like, if they had listed out somebody like a Zach Charbonnet, that's not really a surprise. We know what Zach Charbonnet is. I think most NFL fans at least are aware of the existence of Zach Charbonnet. So that wouldn't have made sense if they had listed out somebody like, a Reek Woolen. That wouldn't be a surprise. He's going to make a contribution to the 2025 Seahawks one way or the other, and it'll be somewhat positive. But this guy making a meaningful contribution to the 2025 Seahawks, this would be a surprise to a vast majority of people. And even though I don't hate this guy the way a lot of people do, it would surprise me as well at this point. Anthony Bradford is probably the most hated Seahawk right now. If you talk about this guy, you're not going to hear anything positive from 95% of this fan base. I'd say a good 95% of this fan base thinks he basically has leprosy. It's a very, very negative fan reaction when you bring up Anthony Bradford. I think you guys know what I'm talking about. More so than probably any other player on the team. Like, you had players on this team that were polarizing. Guys like DK Metcalf, Geno Smith. To a certain extent, somebody like Uchenna Nwosu is polarizing just because he struggled to stay healthy. Ken Walker is polarizing. Bradford's not. Bradford is just hated. He's got very few people in his corner. I'm probably the closest thing to somebody that is in Anthony Bradford's corner, or someone who is in Anthony Bradford's corner, and I'm not even really in his corner. But right up from Brady Henderson goes, when the Seahawks hired offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak, a popular reaction was that Bradford may have a hard time winning back the starting job at right guard. After all, he's a big, powerful blocker who doesn't seem like an ideal fit for an outside zone scheme that suits more athletic linemen. Now, that paragraph I don't agree with. Even if Anthony Bradford is a very bad player, he is athletic. His RAS score is actually one of the best in NFL history for a guard. his athleticism is remarkable for a man his size. And I understand that he might not be as athletic as some of the most athletic guards in the league. I know that there are guards out there that are more athletic than Bradford, but pound for pound, there really aren't. Not right now. There might be like one or two. And even if you remove the pound for pound qualifier, he's athletic. So that's not really the problem with Bradford. The problem with Bradford is just the play, the penalties, the mistakes, the errors made, the mental errors being made throughout the game. So I don't agree with that, but let's finish this paragraph here. It's time to press pause on that notion after a trimmer-looking Bradford shared first-team reps with Christian Haynes during OTAs and minicamp. Now, we knew that Bradford and Haynes were sharing the first-team reps because we read about it during OTAs and minicamp, but I've always kind of gotten the sense that Haynes was probably in the lead. And I'm not saying that he isn't, but let's just keep reading this. AB's done a great job this spring, Coach McDonald said. His body comp has really improved, which speaks to his work ethic. I think he's made strides. It's time to go prove it consistently. He knows that, but he's right in the thick of it with the battle at right guard. So McDonald has proven so far in his career to be a pretty positive guy. He speaks pretty up. He's pretty up on most players on this team at most times. Like most coaches, they're not going to air things out. If they've got a concern, if they've got a criticism of a player, if they see something they don't like, they're not necessarily going to tell the media about it. They're not going to rub the player's nose in it. They're just going to say what needs to be said in public and do what needs to be done privately. But this is still an interesting thing to point out here, that he is having a little bit of a better offseason than some people might have expected. And it's not like Christian Haynes has the right guard spot on lockdown. Christian Haynes looked unplayable last year. He looked worse than Bradford. Not that he played that much, not that that really means that much, but Christian Haynes does not have a hammerlock on that spot. So this is actually kind of interesting. And it's also something that I cannot help but think about, because here's the thing with Anthony Bradford, guys, and this is the thing we forget. I know he's been on this team 2 years, and a lot of people say, well, that's enough time, and we haven't seen anything positive from him, so therefore he can't possibly be anything worth thinking about. Here's the thing with Anthony Bradford. If you go back to his college career, and I'm looking specifically at the snap counts for his college career at LSU. He was there 4 years, but he was really only a 1-year starter. He started pretty much the whole season in 2022, played 815 snaps. That was the 1 year he was really the full-time starter. Other than that, he did get a few starts in 2021, but the 2 years before that, he was basically an afterthought. He was not any kind of an impact player on the LSU offense. He was somebody who got in at the tail end of backups, and he was an emergency break glass in case of injury type player. And if you go back to 2021 and you tally it up, you're talking about, 6 starts plus the, 13 he had in 2022, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, 13. That's not enough for him to get his feet underneath him. So what I'm trying to get at here is that Anthony Bradford probably should not have played at all as a rookie in the NFL, and there's a good argument to be made he shouldn't have played in his sophomore year in the NFL either, because he was nowhere near close to being ready. You can't play this pitiful amount of reps in college and expect to be ready to go unless you are some hyper elite superstar that the talent is just so evident that you declare early without having a lot of playing experience. Like, let's say Arch Manning declares for next year's draft. I'm sure he would go very, very high, probably number 1 overall, even though he only really has 1 full year of experience because his talent is so evident. But that's not the case with Anthony Bradford. In fact, I think that if you look at his blocking charts for by position, I mean, you can see that he only had, and my body's in the way here. Let me move myself out of the way here real quick. Yeah, he played 809 snaps at right guard. Almost 300 of his career snaps were at left tackle, a position that he cannot play and does not play in the NFL. So, in terms of relevant experience to his NFL position, we are talking about basically 1 season worth. If you're talking about his right guard experience, which is the position he's playing in the NFL, it's 1 season, and then he had like a third of a season at left tackle, approximately. Like, that is not a player that should be thrown out there as a rookie, possibly not even as a sophomore. So, in some way, we kind of failed Anthony Bradford by putting him on the field so quickly, by asking as much of him as we did. And I know we didn't ask the world of him, but we probably shouldn't have been asking much of anything from him. This was a super raw guy. And we're sitting here, he's still only 24 years old. He is younger than Christian Haynes by, I think, more than a year. But if this ended up panning out, because I want to stress this again, this isn't just, oh, he's on the roster, so I hope he can find a way to do something for us. This is a very talented player. I think that's what people miss here. For a guy who is over 300 pounds, and maybe he's slimmed down a little bit now, according to McDonald, this is a very athletic player. He's fast, he's quick, he's mobile, he's athletic. He's got a lot in those categories that players his size should not have. So having him out there playing effectively, overcoming the shortcomings of his first 2 years in the NFL, that would be great. And think about what it would do to this offense. Let's think about this offensive line across 2 timelines. So you take a look at the Seahawks offensive line as we imagine it will be in 2025. Obviously, the tackles, they're going to stay the same no matter what. Cross and Lucas, we're not going to get into that. The interior. So right now, I've got Gray Zabel at left guard, Olu Oluwatimi at center, Christian Haynes at right guard. That is the most likely way this breaks out. But let's think about Bradford for a second here, because right now I have him listed as the backup right guard, which is probably where he slots in right now as things stand. But what if Bradford wins the starting right guard job? That is presumably the only job he would win. I don't think he would slim down so much that we could move him to the left side. Well, what now? Well, you've got Christian Haynes, and we know Christian Haynes, even though he spent his whole career playing right guard, is not necessarily a ironclad lock to that position. You look at his skill set, you look at the stuff he did in college, you look at the way he plays, there's every reason to believe that a guy like Christian Haynes could play left guard or center. I don't think that he's married to right guard. I think he played right guard in college because that's where they put him. And by the grace of the football gods, he never had to move. And I'm sure he appreciated that. But I don't think there's anything in his skill set or ability that forces him to stay at right guard. So what if you move Haynes to center? Well, now you're bumping out Oluwatimi, who, I'm sorry, I know some people like Oluwatimi. I think the floor is very, very low there. I think Oluwatimi, look, Pro Football Focus ranked him as basically the worst starting center in football a couple weeks ago. And I don't think that ranking is really that far off, if it's off at all. And maybe he can get a little bit better, but you got to understand, he came into the league a relatively finished product because he had so much college experience, and we haven't seen a ton of him in the first 2 years of his career, but we've seen a decent amount. I don't think he's going to get much better than what he is. I think there are too many limitations there that kind of have him capping out at being a below average to bad, but nevertheless capable center. So now you're replacing the low ceiling of Oluwatimi with someone like Haynes, who has a higher ceiling. You see what I'm getting at here? It's upping the potential of this offensive line. Right now, I don't hate Oluwatimi, but I do view him as being the one piece of this offensive line that has a low ceiling that I cannot imagine being bumped up very much. Or there's another way. What if Christian Haynes bumps over to left guard? What if Christian Haynes plays the other side? He should be able to do it. I don't think there's anything with Haynes that has to be a right guard. I think that probably with Bradford, he has to be a right guard at this point, especially. Haynes, I'm not so sure. Haynes's agility and mobility, which is, I'd say, a little bit smoother and more controlled than Bradford's. Bradford's a little bit of a bull in China shop. I think that could cut it at left guard. And then Gray Zabel can bump into center, where he might end up having to go anyway because of how short his arms are. And again, you're upping the ceiling because you're taking Oluwatimi off the field. Then Oluwatimi becomes a backup. Zabel's your center. Haynes is your left guard. Bradford's your right guard. There's real potential there for that line to be very good. Maybe not immediately because they're young and they don't have experience and they don't have experience playing with each other. But that could actually be a really good and long-term interior offensive line. I think we got something there. I think that's actually something to be excited about. Again, I don't hate Oluwatimi. I think the ceiling is low. I think that Pro Football Focus ranked him as the 31st best starting center in the league. And maybe they're off, but they're not that far off. He's still near the bottom. And I don't believe he has some next gear he can switch up to that will make him even average. So I would like to see something like this personally. This is kind of my dream. This is how I think this offensive line fast tracks to being a big improvement over last year. Because right now I think the offensive line will be better than last year because the offensive line last year was so bad. I'm not convinced it's going to be way better. But if you get Oluwatimi off the field, get someone with higher potential out there, Haynes or Zabel, and they can quickly pick the position up, or in some cases, they probably already have the position. Remember, Haynes and Zabel both played some center at the Senior Bowl, and they both looked fine doing it. So it's not like it's completely foreign to them. And if it all fits together, you could have a really good offensive line in 2025. Like, not just an average one. It could be really good. And I like the shot at the upside. Because, again, I don't think there's enough sauce with the center position right now unless something like this comes together. So let me know what you guys think. Interesting article, interesting read, interesting thoughts. See you guys later. Go Hawks.